Wonderful. Nicole, thank you so much for hopping on this call and agreeing to have a conversation today. Really excited to be discussing all of the wonderful work that you're doing at your organization. But before we get into the details, I was thinking I would pass it to you to maybe give us a short introduction about you, your company, and the sort of work that you do.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you very much for having us. My name is Nicole Gaby, and I'm the Vice President of People and Culture at Financial Plus Credit Union. We are a Michigan-based company, a Michigan-based credit union, and we have been in business since 1952. And we currently have over 82,000 members. We are in several different regions of Michigan, and we currently have 12 branches and over 300 employees. And a little bit about me is I started in the industry, in the HR industry, well over 15 years ago. However, I've been working at Financial Plus for the last 11, and I started out as a part-time HR assistant, and since then have been promoted into an HR generalist. I was a senior generalist for a while, an HR manager. I became the director of people and culture a couple of years ago, and then most recently, I've got promoted to our vice president of people and culture. I have watched our team grow from three to a team of nine. I have the span of learning and development, DEI, and our HR departments. And ultimately, I've stayed in this business for several different reasons, but really, Financial Plus has been a great learning experience for me. It's been a home for me. It has been a strong community of learning, and I've never been bored and I've never been dissatisfied in my job. And so that's kind of the reason why I stay and the reason why I really, really enjoy it.
That's an amazing career trajectory from sort of the very, very most junior independent contributor role to now the most senior role. And also quite the statement about FPCU that you enjoy it so much and you're so committed to it. That's wonderful. And I think it also speaks, of course, to the culture of the organization, which is something that we want to get into and leads us into the next question around how do you think about diversity and inclusion? Why is it important to you? And how has that possibly, evolved, let's say, over the last year where things have been, kind of in flux for a lot of organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question to ask, and so true about our time period today of what's going on in the world. But really, why DEI is so important to us is it's because it's not a new concept, right? The Civil Rights Movement, the Civil Rights Act of 1965, has really kind of started the whole thing for us in the HR industry, of just making sure that we have all the freedoms that we're given, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, making sure that we don't have discrimination, right? So that kind of started us off in the whole HR world about focusing on DEI, and it's since evolved into those words: diversity, equity, inclusion. But it's something, and I'm sure it's going to continuously evolve into something else in its later day, acceptance, understanding, whatever that needs to look like. However, it's always been something that as HR representatives, HR leaders should be focused on. Well, how do we get the most diverse candidates, the most qualified candidates? How do we provide equity within the organization? And how do we make our environment an accepting one, right? The one that we allow several different races or genders or identities to come into an organization, and how do we make them feel welcome, right? So it's kind of since evolved in a lot of different ways. I would say that one of the things that I'm very, very passionate about is making sure that people understand the proper way to implement a DEI strategy. And for us at Financial Plus, the most important thing for us is to focus and lead with inclusivity. And so leading with inclusion, and for us, what that really means is just that everybody's welcomed at the table, right? So I can sit next to any of our 300 of employees and be able to sit and have a conversation with somebody else, and understand and to actively listen, to understand where they're coming from, and to respect and understand their position off of something. So we've started with that methodology at Financial Plus, and it seems to have worked wonderfully. There's, obviously flaws. There's always ways to improve, but I feel like the best thing that we're doing is continuously focusing on that portion of our strategy for our employee experience.
Yeah. That, I think that's frankly the best way to focus on it. And I completely agree with you. This isn't, a controversial concept, really. At least it shouldn't be, in my perspective. This is something that goes back to conversations we were having for a very long time, and just sort of basic humanity and our desire to be treated well and treated fairly. So I really, that framing very much resonates with me. I think one thing interesting thing that you said is about DEI strategy and how to approach it in an authentic and kind of comprehensive way. Can you talk a little bit about your strategy and the way that it's kind of manifested over the last little while?
Yeah, of course I can. I think I kind of briefly touched on our inclusivity, but it really, for what that means to us is working within our employee experience environment, right? And so we do take a look at how is the employee experience from different levels of the organization, and how do we make sure that we have an acceptance and understanding of one another. Some of the things that we do to propel that portion of our strategy forward is that we make sure that we have consistent one-on-ones. And in order to have a consistent one-on-one, we need to have trust within our employees and our management, right? So how do we do that? We have a training with our managers of how to properly have a coaching session, right? We allow roundtable discussions within our organization. We have essentially in a suggestions box, right, that allows our employees to put forth their opinions, and for us to be able to see if there's solutions to those things, or is it something we just need to kind of maybe provide a training on of like, actually, we do that. That's a great suggestion. We've done that before, right? So the employee experience as a whole, I think that's also kind of why we work and consult with Diversio, right, to see where do we stand in an inclusivity measurement. The other part of it, when we talk about DEI strategy, is our diversity, right? What does diversity look like within our organization as a whole? And how do we continuously build a strong candidate pool for those diversity levels of minorities to continuously to go on and increase, right? So that's another portion that we focus on. And what we do for that is we're consistently tracking, right? What does that look like from our candidates? Where are we sourcing our candidates from? And then we also are doing a really deep dive within the HR side is what do our interview questions look like? Is this the best approach? Are we finding the right candidates, or what's within ourselves as management too, right? Are we, a little bit biased towards the person that looks like us? Are we biased towards the person that maybe speaks like me or has that same fun activity? Or are we actually taking a look at the candidate, the qualifications of that job, and matching that best feature, right? Another thing that we do to attribute to our diversity strategy is we use a company called PI, which is predictive index. And, similar to like a DISC model, we actually look at that as part of the piece of the puzzle is how would they predictively act within our environment, right? And what we look for, oddly enough, what we found that works the best is that everybody's PI that is not exactly the same, they're in different groups, right? So we want to be able to have like collaboration hubs in each of our departments to make that diversity strong, because it's not just about, race, but it is about race, gender, identity, age, education, thought. Right. There's just so many other things when we think about diversity that makes our company who we are, our DNA. Right. And then the third thing that we focus on is really equity, which is for us that equates to two things internally in making sure that we have a strong compensation strategy within HR. And then the other portion is externally, what are we doing to promote equity in our communities that we serve, right? With over 83,000 members across Michigan, making sure that we are providing voices for our community that are marginalized, within the communities that we serve. That's super important to us. So we give back. Um, Last year, we gave back $42,000 into our communities just on minority groups and diversity, actually equity inclusion alone.
That's Incredible. And I think that's such a holistic way of thinking about it because you're not looking only inwards, but you're also looking outwards. And I think a lot of organizations are starting to think about that, but you're doing that, right? Like, what is the impact that you're able to bring to the community as well as how you act as an employer? And I happen to know, not to like lead the witness, but I happen to know that you have a wonderful project that I would love our listeners to kind of hear about, the Visibility Project. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I can talk about that. I'm very happy and proud of it. Actually, a while back, 3 years ago, we started a project called the Billboards of Inclusion Project. We have since rebranded it. I can kind of explain that a little bit before, but the Visibility Project is an opportunity for small minority-owned businesses to put in an application with Financial Plus and for us to select a winner and that prize being an opportunity to be seen. And what that looks like today is having our newest winner is going to be able to have a billboard anywhere that they like to be seen, right? So if they're a little bit more towards that Saginaw market, we'll put it obviously in a market that they want to be seen, so they can get that visibility. And then we're also going to provide up to $2,000 worth of promotional items for themselves. So take their brand, pick whatever they want. Do they need shirts? That kind of solidify their small business that make them like as they take those leaps and bounds forward in their own entrepreneurship, how can we help that? Or do they need some promotional items so that way they can pass out to patrons or potential customers or clients? I think it's an important step forward to make sure that we help the equity ladder, if you will, that it's an opportunity for a small minority owned business that they probably wouldn't spend their money or time on, or they might need just additional help from an organization like us, being $1.5 billion in assets. It's a good opportunity for us to give back and provide some expertise in there.
That's amazing. And can you maybe share a bit more about the previous winners or what kind of businesses you've been working with?
Yes, we've worked with Drinks of Essence before. So she owns a bartending school in Flint area, and she is one of the only bartenders that is licensed to teach bartending, right? So really, really cool, but a small business from there. And we actually just selected our newest winner. She's in Essexville, out in Essexville, and she actually works with oh man, I'm gonna forget the name of this actual business. I can't
That's
remember her
okay.
name, but in Essexville, they actually work with disability patrons and they help them find jobs. And
Wow.
so, what a great opportunity to work with somebody that is, giving their life, right? Giving their work to promote others out there to get jobs. And we want to be a partner into that. And we want to make sure that we promote those things.
That's amazing and hugely impactful, especially for small business owners. And I think that's something that you can really change, like the trajectory or even the growth of your enterprise. How did you come up with the idea, or when did this get started?
When we thought about our approach in strategy of giving back to the communities that we serve and what we can feature, what can we offer, right? We actually have a phenomenal marketing team that does a lot of things in-house, which is not typical or normal. A lot of people do outsource and do a lot of those things. We have a really talented team internally. And so we said, hey, if we wanted to give something back with the resources that we have, what could we particularly do? And so from a collaboration group and our DEI council, this was the idea that kind of came out. And it's been successful for the last 3 years. We continue to build and get more and more applications in, and it continues to amaze me as we watch and read through all of the applications every single year to think about how many people are really just doing excellent, just
Yeah,
amazing work. You wish you could just, say yes to everybody, right? But we also have to think about time restraints and restrictions and how that works out. But it's been a phenomenal opportunity to partner with our marketing team, and as well as those, individual businesses and promote their name out there, which is another benefit of the visibility project.
that's huge. Maybe now for a second we can throw it back to something that we were also talking about earlier, which is kind of your approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion internally, and specifically, a little bit biased, but I find that our work together between Diversio and FPCU has been really interesting. And when we work with organizations, of course, what we love to see is companies who look at their data, who understand where the challenges are and take action. And that I think is exactly what you did in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I wanted to maybe ask you a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Um, we were really excited to get the data that we got from Diversio when it first came out. And we found, our scores are pretty good, right? I think we landed in like the 77th, percent of where we landed, right? And it's funny because what we did with that data is we talked about it with our executives, shared, those results and kind of like a plan of how we like to roll this out to our employees, right? And so we started with all of our managers, made it mandatory for them to come. And we actually did a deep dive of each of the sections of those questions. And we talked about, as a group, what are the things that we do to support that statement? And what are the things that we do as leaders that you'd like to see for us to improve upon, right? So we started with that. And then we are now into our second section where we've relayed all the information to all of our employees. We made this, optional meetings for employees to come and visit. We actually went into the website. We clicked on things. We wanted to make sure that everybody could see that it really was anonymous. We talked about the results as its entirety. It's not meant to, your results are your results. You're not meant to say like to put a positive spin on something or a
Yeah.
negative spin. They are the results, right? And I just said to you something that was like, I think 77 is a great score. But we even talk about it is that maybe in somebody else's eyes, a 77 is not great. It could be, perception,
Pretty
back.
good, but
Yes.
yeah, of
But even, when you're in school,
course.
were you the person that was in school that couldn't stand getting that 89 that really needed to be at that 90 to show the A, right? Or was it was somebody like me where I was like, yeah, I'm happy with the 77. That's basically a C plus. It's probably a B minus. I passed, right? So there's different perceptions of how that number really comes across, right? And so when you think about that, you have nothing, it's not a point to argue about where does that 77 land and how good is it. What we do need to focus on as an organization is how do we make that better, right?
Yeah.
Because no matter what in the world, we are humans and we are strivers. So we constantly want to do more. Even if that score was a 99, we want it to be 100, right? Because we are striving for better and to make things better. But right now, even back with our Diversio, we're working on our final leg, which is having individual roundtable discussions. They are more intimate. Less than 20 people are allowed to attend to each of these sessions. And we are actually going through and not just hearing the things that have happened, but
Yeah.
what are the solutions to move forward. And getting and gaining buy-in from our employees has been awesome, not just from hearing their own perspectives on how they believe that we can make Financial Plus better, but the opportunity to open the door in another way for our employees, for people to feel that they can feel comfortable with their feedback, not have that fear of retribution, retaliation, right? It's so important and it's really helped drive our culture even forward, more forward than we've had before.
Yeah. Amazing. And, this probably goes back to sort of the ethos of the organization. But what kind of perpetuated this level of transparency, I suppose, in communication with employees? Because I find that, um, first of all, you as an organization are incredibly transparent, even relative to other transparent organizations that we worked with. But also sometimes when we talk to companies and they receive their results and they see something bad, there's a tendency to potentially like shy away from it or try to obscure it in some sense when they're playing the numbers back to their employees. And I understand that there's an innate sort of fear, of saying, hey, we're not maybe very good at this. And there's, sometimes leaders feel like um, they potentially will be judged or whatever it is in these situations. And so I wonder, and of course, like I said, a 77 is pretty great. But how did you think about that transparency, and was that important for you?
Well, I would say it's actually not our first time being that transparent. We've done a couple surveys in our past and in 2019, 2021, where we wanted to make sure that we relay those results as well. I think that for me is yes, you could essentially have some fears of how are people going to react to that information. I would rather have somebody I guess you could say, judge me off of judge me off of having high integrity and being honest, than catching me in a lie. So I guess for me is I think that the win always is going to outweigh the possibility negativity of trying to spin the results. So I think that's really, really important. But I really truly believe that one of the biggest foundations of inclusivity is building trust. And you can't do that when you're hiding truths or not really, not displaying the whole picture. Now, as an organization, you can't display the whole picture all the time, or you have to do it kind of in segments, as we get through things, because some things are on the confidential level, and then finally it's all coming around. But I think truly, honestly, when you have the opportunity to be open and upfront the entire way through, you should 100% take the chance, because I think the wins far outweigh the potential negatives in those conversations.
That was very well said, and I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I also happen to know that you uh, have piloted as a result of some of the work that we've been doing over the last little while is a mentorship program. And I
Yeah.
was hoping you might talk about this a little bit, because mentorship and sponsorship is such a huge component of inclusion across organizations, and it is difficult to get right, and it is difficult for, everyone in the organization to feel like someone is invested in them and their growth and that level of like future forward looking within the company. And so I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, actually, we're really proud of it. It's called Path Makers. We started it in July, and it really was based off of the feedback that we received from Diversio, our consultations. One of the things that was brought forward that we could do to help one of our questions essentially was, making sure that you have somebody in a position of influence, right? Is there somebody in that organization? And we couldn't really answer those questions all the way. We didn't have enough support. So the opportunity of saying, hey, why don't you join or create a mentorship program came about. When we found that, or when we received that information, we sat down with our HR and L&D departments and started collaborating on what would be the best way to approach that. Our director of organizational development, his name is Bill Tina, he decided to take it on, and with the way that we decided to make it work is we send out a survey every single. It's a 4 month long program, and we send out a survey. We ask, do you want to be a mentor or do you want to be a mentee? And if you are a mentor, we basically say, hey, would you tell us your span of expertise that you could provide, right? And so it can provide anywhere from Excel training to time management to having difficult discussions, to professionalism in the workplace, right? So soft skills and even some analytical skills that are needed for our employees to grow into an organization. Really excited that we kind of matched up 40 employees, 40, 45 employees this last session. We're wrapping them up here in the next couple of weeks of our first session. We are also doing surveys throughout the time of kind of making sure that we're checking in, right? Are you meeting with your mentor? What's the feedback that's given? Are we having that right? And we're going to continuously grow and evolve from there. For us, this consultation of having a mentorship program really made a lot of sense within our cultural lines and values, because our credit union mission is people helping people, right?
Yeah.
So it's so cool to be able to apply that really internally and watch that grow and expand. And personally, I've been a mentor prior to and in different organizations, but I feel really blessed that I'm a mentor in this program, and I am meeting with a person, a team member who's been with the company for less than 6 months,
Yeah.
who's a teller in a different department, a completely different branch. What a great opportunity for me to meet somebody else and get to know them on a personal level and help them, grow and develop into the person that they want to be. So it's been really, it's been great so far, and we're really excited. We're going to wrap it up in October. And the goal is to take a month break and then
Yeah.
kind of send the survey out again and then do it again for another 4 months.
Yeah. Amazing. And I love how quickly you did this too. I find that a lot of organizations sometimes might be a bit hesitant and, want to really, really take their time to build out something holistic from the get-go and, get it 100% right. And with some of these things, sometimes it's better to just try it, to pilot something, to get that feedback exactly to your point. You might not get it perfect, but at least you'll start something. And I find a lot of the time that really resonates with employees. What makes you so action forward, I suppose?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with our CEO and our executive team. One of the things that we focus on here is that we make decisions pretty much within that 40th and 70th percentile. And what I mean about that is when you're gathering information and data, do you have enough information to go ahead and pull the trigger off of something, right? Essentially. Now, sometimes it takes, maybe it's a, $1 million, investment or, question. That's going to take a little bit beyond the 70%. But generally, and that especially when it comes to people, you do need to focus on making sure that you just pull the trigger and try. A
Yeah,
lot of that comes down to also our environment and our culture, though, is that we also breed an environment where you can make a mistake. We just
yeah,
don't want you to make the mistake multiple times in a row. So it's kind of in our organization, it's better to try, right? So we're going to have that same mentality when it comes to new projects and new ideas, because you never know. Just by starting this way, there's probably going to be some feedback that we're going to get after the first session's done, and we do already kind of even in our heads say maybe we should start having like a checklist of some things that we want to make sure that employee is getting out of that experience,
yeah,
right? But it's okay. We just started it, right? It's okay. We're going to evolve and grow. And I think the third thing that we focus on in our environment is that we know we're not perfect. It's always progress over perfection. And if you focus on that way in your life, you'll actually be a lot more successful and probably a lot more, move forward in your career and your life if you focus on your progress and not the perfection over something.
amazing. Yes, I totally agree. We have a similar ethos internally as well. Move fast and break things, but within like sort of within reason, and I suppose within the support system that is
Yeah.
hopefully built around you.
Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. So, I know that we're kind of coming up to the end of our conversation, but one last thing that I really wanted to ask you is for your advice. I think as an organization that is clearly authentically committed to this work, you're doing it really well. You're doing it genuinely with passion and very effectively. I think what advice would you give for an organization that is bought in and wants to try, but maybe they're a little bit early in their journey?
Um, what advice would I like to give to organizations early in their journey that, what should they do? Um, I think that the best advice I can give is that if you're passionate about something, it is always going to be worth moving forward. So I think that the point is when I think about even just from a perspective is anxiety and stress happens when there's no movement forward, when there's no action that's done with it. So I think that just put forward the action, come up with a small plan and make and grow off of that. Maybe that's my best advice is come up with a small plan and have a goal in mind, but just take small actionable steps and eventually you'll get there.
Yeah,
Don't rely on perfection, don't rely on anything else. Just go in there with a genuine heart and try something. And it's okay to articulate that to your employees as well, is that we're going to try something. It may not work. And we'll listen to the feedback if it doesn't work, but can we try something? And most people are all in.
yeah. I love that. And that goes back to your previous point about, you'd rather be judged for being kind of honest and transparent as opposed to, trying to obscure something. I think that that really, really lands. Nicole, thank you
Yeah.
so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for inviting us. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate our partnership with Diversio because
Oh,
it's really been a great opportunity to get that data. And I think that is so important as we can become, as an organization, as the world becomes more data driven. It's really great that we have a company that is providing that for us. So we really appreciate your partnership.
amazing. I mean, I couldn't agree more, but I'm obviously biased, but you said it.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Thanks so much.